Look, Limerick in at number one. There's no real debate about that, is there?
No debate. No, not really. No.
I have Clare as number two now.
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you this way: undefeated throughout Munster, drew at Limerick already, albeit a Limerick side that was missing Gallan and Keane Lynch. Absolutely battered Waterford. Fair enough. Waterford were looked like a busted flush, but Clare couldn't have done much more than they've done so far. They're in the Munster final, and they're in with a fighting chance in the Munster final as well. We know from form this year that they can put it up to Limerick in both league and championship. So I have no issue with Clare number two.
Yeah, well, look, a Clare native, Adrian McGrath says, how do you power rank? Clare could beat Limerick. Limerick definitely beat Cork, but Cork could beat Clare. Galway to lose Leinster, but should beat Cork. Cork beat Kilkenny. Wexford can't beat Clare. Wexford can beat Kilkenny, but not Westmeath. So, I mean, this is the whole thing. It's very definite. It's not like you have a league table in soccer, and at the end of the year, Man City end a point ahead of Liverpool. So, therefore, you can't deny the fact that there was such a huge amount of games available to you that you have to accept that they were the number one team. You're going a little bit on instinct, on feeling, on, I suppose, styles make fights. Sometimes, maybe Clare are more suited to playing Limerick than, for example, Tipperary might be, or that Cork might be. So some of it is just kind of like the eye test, the feeling about how you think certain teams will go, how they've done in the past couple of seasons, how much do you believe in a certain team, because at least they showed you last season that in a tight game they can get X, Y, or Z done. Or maybe there are players who you think, well, this lad is as you'd say, coming to hand in horse racing terms this season. So there's a whole lot of different reasons, but there's no exact science around it. It's just like a feeling in many situations, and there's no way around that, is there?
No, I think on Adrian's question there, a consistency and a bit of longevity comes into it as well. Like Limerick have done it since 2018, have been up there the whole time. They've dipped throughout a league maybe, but throughout championship, like they were brilliant in championship in 18, 19, albeit beaten in the All-Ireland semi-final, 20, 21, and they've been brilliant in championship in 2022 as well. So and there's no sign of them slowing down really. There was another question asked there. Or Garota Grackon asked, would there be debate on Limerick on number one next week? So, to me, even if Clare beat Limerick, and I think it would be a tight game if Clare were to win, there's still the caveat probably of Keane Lynch being back for a knockout game, be it a quarter-final or semi-final. So, there's still probably further improvement from Limerick to come. Like, if you're number one without the two-time hurler of the year and you're beaten by a couple of points, I think you're still number one because he's going to be potentially he's going to be back as well. But listen, that's all part of the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is. Now, I think some people in Galway might say, hey, why aren't we number one here? Number two here. But I still think it has to be Clare. I think Cork got to the All-Ireland final last year, and the last couple of games they've shown a little bit more about they've shown a little bit more of what they're about. But you couldn't have them up there just yet. Is there anyone else? Like, obviously, Watford have kind of nosedived the last couple of weeks. There's no way you can have them in there. Wexford, yes, they won in Kilkenny, but they did draw Westmeath, like Adrian has explained there. It's hard to say if you'd have them up there just yet. Kilkenny, there's some parts where you'd be like, well, you can't not believe in them because they've got Owen Cody, Adrian Mullen. But then the flip side is they probably have the most unsettled-looking team of any of the teams that are going into the. I suppose there's 8 teams left at this stage, but obviously the competition is structured the way it is. But anyway, of the teams left, you'd say they're the most unsettled looking, and they do have plenty of questions around them. And then there's no getting away from it. Leinster is not as strong as Munster, so you're almost leaning towards the Munster teams by virtue of getting out of that bear pit.
Yeah. To some extent, yeah. Like Munster is so hard to get out of, and Galway have we learned too much about Galway yet? Probably not. We haven't really learned much when they play Cork potentially, or they play Clare maybe, or obviously if they play Limerick, that's when we'll really know about them. But I'd probably have, I don't know, Galway, Cork. I'd say Galway. It's between Galway and Cork for 3 and 4 realistically.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't have Cork behind Kilkenny, for example, because they beat them in the league semi-final and they beat them in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. Now, people are quick to poo-poo Cork, but you can't ignore that. And they got further, they've gotten further than Galway did last year. So, I don't know. I think maybe you could make a fair case for Galway or Cork number 3. But Kilkenny are back-to-back Leinster champions. So they'd say, well, why on earth don't you have us ahead of them? Now, they only lost them by a point recently. but the Leinster finals are the one that matters. So in a way, you almost have to have Kilkenny higher than Galway if you're going to go on results. But the feeling is that I would imagine that Galway will get closer to Limerick than Kilkenny would. And this is why it's impossible to just nail down a formula.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that. Obviously, you go back to Kilkenny are the last team to beat Limerick in a championship game as well. And aside to that, I still think he's never said openly, but I still think John Kyle. I think they're mad to right that wrong, and I even get that feeling. I even get that feeling massively from Kieran Carey as well, that if there's one box that they have to tick, it's getting revenge on Kilkenny. But as you said, like I don't know, Kilkenny could potentially put it up to Limerick again. You just don't know, and there's a bit of form there to say that they might, but they just haven't. They haven't, like, they were brilliant against Dublin. That form didn't work out at all. They were, to me, they were atrocious against Wexford. That was the worst performance I've seen from Kilkenny in a long, long time. Yes, they're back-to-back Leinster champions, but they're probably going into this Leinster final under a bit of a cloud. Like, I wonder how many changes will there be for Kilkenny, even in the match day squad. I think there'll be an absolute heap of changes because that's generally how Cody reacts these days. But Kilkenny are probably 5 for me, realistically, and it's probably Galway 3, Cork 4, Kilkenny 5. That would be my thoughts on it at the moment. Anyway, Cork are still there, but based on their first 2 games and how it doesn't look like they're getting any closer to Limerick, in my view, I'd probably have Galway at 3 because they were consistent throughout Leinster.
Yeah, I've actually put Wexford 5 and Kilkenny 6 here. You don't fully agree with that, no? Wexford beat Kilkenny.
It's a difficult one because obviously Wexford beat Kilkenny. But like, if you're taking the Leinster Championship as a whole, it's difficult. Wexford drew at Galway. They hammered Laois. They drew at Westmeath. They beat Kilkenny. Kilkenny were beaten by Galway and beaten by Wexford. It seems a bit mad to put a team ahead of, Wexford were 3rd in Leinster and we're putting them ahead of Kilkenny. But I understand where you're coming from as well.
Yeah, do you know what? Kilkenny tend to get further in the championship and they've won back-to-back Leinster titles. I think we have to give them their dues here and say that Wexford have to do a little bit more than beat them once by just a point to be ahead of them here. Even though, I've pointed out, I think there are frailties with this Kilkenny team.
Yeah, I think it was 4, wasn't it? I think they actually beat them by 4. But
by 4.
If you had £100 on, who's going to go farther in the championship, Kilkenny or Wexford, who would you put it on?
Kilkenny.
Okay, and I'd be the same, and they are going for a hat-trick of Leinster titles as well. And despite Galway being a couple of places ahead of them, it's far from inconceivable to think that Kilkenny would win the Leinster final on Saturday.
Yeah, look, it's really, really fine margins between, I think, pretty much everyone from 2 to 6 here. Maybe Clare are that bit ahead because they just look intensity-wise and the way they work in packs that they can get a little bit higher than the others, but remains to be seen. Adrian McGrath says, there are signs of Limerick slowing down for me. Average league, can see 2 late goals versus Waterford, 60 minutes versus Tip, 70 minutes versus Clare, very competitive. Still the best, but teams are getting to the base camp now, which is a fair point. That might be very well be the way. So we've gone with the top 6 teams are the teams that are getting through. We know Antrim and Kerry are in the All-Ireland preliminary quarterfinals. It's just a case of seeing who wins it and who goes through as the runner-up. But if we're to talk about the other teams that got knocked out of the provincial championships, who are you going with 7th here? Are you looking at Dublin? Are you looking at Waterford? Are you looking at Tipperary? Are you looking at who are you looking at here?
Well, Waterford are ahead of both Dublin and Tipperary anyway. Just wondering about some other teams. So Westmeath need to come into the equation at some stage. Laois are probably going to be down the bottom. Antrim need to come into the equation as well, and Kerry need to come into it too. I probably have Waterford at 7. Yeah, they still won the league. They beat Tipperary by 4. I'm still scratching my head as to what happened with Waterford, but there's still lots of potential there. But I wonder, what happens in the off-season now? If they do change manager or Liam Cattell parts ways, what are your thoughts on Waterford then? And depending on who takes over, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, and you hear different sort of things coming out. You know the way rumor mills go once a team starts to tailspin a small bit. And do you know what? for the most part, over the last 2.5 years, Watford have been doing nothing except going on an upward trajectory. They've had injuries and different things, lose the odd game here and there. But in general, it's felt fairly smooth upwards. They have a bad 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it feels like, everything has gone to hell in a handcart. And you hear about, they were training 10 days in a row before the, whatever game, the last couple of games or whatever. And you wonder, well, how much of this can be true? And you just never really know is the thing, because it's not like one of the players is going to come on here and talk about it. But I do think Watford are next in the list there. And, in many ways, I still think that they'd beat Wexford. I think that they'd beat Kilkenny in Championship. They've done that in recent times, but they're gone. And their form has just kind of done it. Like, look at how much they absolutely hammered Wexford in the league semi-final.
Yeah.
But still, they're gone out of the Championship, so what can you do?
Have we ever had a Championship like this, or a year like this so far? When you look at it, like, Limerick were, poor throughout the league. Clare were decent throughout the league, but they've really stepped up. At different stages, Galway were poor in the league. Cork looked like after the league semi-final that Cork were really coming. Then they lose 2 games, and then they turn it around. Kilkenny beat Dublin, and then they're beaten by Wexford, so you don't know where they are. Wexford draw at Westmeath, and then they beat Kilkenny. They draw with Galway, but they draw at Westmeath, and then they beat Kilkenny. Waterford win the league, looked like the second best team in the country, next best to Limerick. And you said they had a bad 3 weeks. They had an absolutely atrocious couple of weeks, and they're gone out of the Championship. Tipperary don't win a championship game, but yet can put it up to Limerick for 60 minutes. Dublin can beat Wexford, but not get a result against anybody else of consequence in Leinster, and they're gone as well. Like, it's mad. And I was only thinking about this the other day. I remember you basically saying on the show about 3 or 4 weeks ago, sure, Dublin are true. Dublin are Leinster. It's gas. Like, it's just, this season is particularly bizarre so far.
Yeah, and ML89 says the last 2 league champions have both gone out of the Championship without a whimper. Galway last year and Waterford this year. League is league and all that, as they say. So I'm going to bring up the table once more and see, do you agree with how I've finished off the table here?
Oh, someone one of the lads that commented in there, you probably get it up. He had Westmeath ahead of Tipperary. I think he had Westmeath at 9 and Tipperary at 10. Yeah, go man.
Go crack on. Just banning you from the page now.
Tip Dublin. Well, listen, I'd still have Tipperary ahead of Dublin, definitely. Yeah, you'd still have Dublin ahead of Westmeath. Oh yeah, Laois are lucky to be 11 if they are 11 at all. I'd probably have Antrim ahead of Laois at the moment. Basically all we're basing it on is that Laois beat Antrim in their Division 1B league game, and their form has totally nosedived thereafter, apart from the Dublin game. Whereas Antrim have been very good throughout the McDonagh, and their only loss came. They were very good against Offaly in that relegation game. Their only loss came against the Kerry team in the last round, where they were already through to the final.
That's true, but you'd have to say that Laois relegated them last year, had huge injury issues, and very close to beating Dublin the first day out. I know they lost to Westmeath and shipped a fairly heavy scoreline, but like, can you ignore the fact that they did relegate Antrim last year?
But they're relegated themselves now going into 2023. Like, so we're putting a Joe McDonagh team ahead of. Well, that's not to say Antrim aren't definitely a Liam McCarthy team yet, but I just think, aside from saving their bacon in that relegation match last year and saving their Division 1 bacon against Westmeath and beating Antrim this year, like, they've shown, they just have, to me, they haven't shown enough. Been honest with you. And I know they were missing a lot of players or whatever. You wouldn't be 100% sure that their manager is still going to be there next year. So I'm not so sure. I'd have Laois at 12. Yeah, being honest.
Okay, I flipped them around and then put Kerry in there as well, because we're going to see Kerry in an All-Ireland preliminary quarter-final. Who knows? Maybe in the Munster Championship next year, if they can win their next 2 matches. Isn't that right?
Good man.
For more exclusive content, go to patreon.com/OurGame.